What's up YouTube, Webbers5 here, coming out today with the deck profile most of you have been waiting for. That's right, it's time for Endymion. Now before we get into the profile, I just want to do a quick shout out to Extreme Yugioh 18, who's been frequently asking me questions on advice on how to build the deck. I really appreciate that you value my opinion, and it means a lot to me that you would come to me for my help, so thank you very much, and I really appreciate it. If anyone else is looking for other bits of tips for the advice on the deck or just in general about the game, I'm always online on my Facebook. My Facebook's pretty easy to find. Just pop my YouTuber name next to the facebook.com and I'll get back to you quite easily because I'm online most of the time. So yeah, hopefully. Before I get into the profile, I was just saying, the build I've gone with is kind of a very basic deck. It's pretty much pure variant, so I'm not doing anything crazy with it, which is kind of disappointing for me because I like doing crazy techs with my decks. But no, this time I've gone for the build which I find is one of the most consistent. I did a lot of testing with it today and I was very pleased with the results. So without further ado, let's get into this profile. Okay guys, so starting the profile off, we got the boss monster of the deck, Endymion, the Mighty Master of Magic. So this guy, he's your boss monster, your main win condition. And interesting enough guys, this card now holds the record of the Yu-Gi-Oh card with the longest amount of text. Which kind of isn't difficult because it's a pendulum monster, but still, the amount of text on this guy is insane. And I apologize guys, but by default every other YouTuber I've seen doing this deck profile for the first time explains his entire effect, so you better believe I'm going to have to explain the entire effect. So his pendulum effect is you can remove 6 spell counters from your field to special summon him from your pendulum zone. Then you get to destroy cards your opponent controls up to the number of cards you control that have a spell counter. And then you place spell counters on him equal to the number of cards that you destroyed, and you can only use that effect once per turn. So that's the main reason of how you win the deck, because if you go second with this deck, you just summon Endymion once you've set up a bunch of cards, and then you just basically obliterate your opponent's board. Because it's all non-targeting destruction, and the other advantage of this is that because it all activates in your pendulum zone, it all activates in your pendulum zone. So when you summon it and do your destruction, your opponent can't effect value you, they can't infinite impermanence. Basically, it's just your main win condition to win the game. Though naturally, in terms of the infinite impermanence, you do have to watch out if Endymion's in the same zone as infinite impermanence, because that can still stop it. And naturally, a Ghost Ogre stops it as well. Now, as for the monster effect, as most people know, the Endymion monsters, unlike most cards, do not gain spell counters as monsters by normal means, which kind of sucks, but still. So Endymion's monster effect is once per turn, if a spell card, trap card, or effect is activated, as a quick effect, you can bounce a card you control which has a spell counter on it to negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. And then you get to move the spell counters that were on the card that you bounced to itself so that you don't lose anything. And then his next effect is, while he has a spell counter on himself, he cannot be targeted or destroyed by your opponent's card effects. It's essentially one of the main reasons this card is so good against Sky Strikers. So you just drop him with your pendulum effect or off the effects of one of your other cards, and then you're at good advantage because your opponent can't Widow Anchor, your opponent can't Afterburners. Basically, drop that against Sky Striker, turn 2, you basically just win the game. And then his final effect, which doesn't come up too frequently, but it's still a pretty good effect. That is that if he's destroyed in battle, while he's got a spell counter on him, you can rotate your deck for any normal spell card. So that's really good. And his stats aren't too bad either, 28 and 17, so pretty decent body on the field. And so yeah, anybody playing the Endymion deck, you definitely want to max out on this. Non-optional. Okay, next, playing 3 of the Servants of Endymion. This is the card you always want to see when you're setting up. So Servant, as a pendulum effect, she gains a spell counter every time a spell card resolves. She doesn't have a spell cap, so she can hold as many as possible. And then her pendulum effect is you can remove 3 spell counters from herself to special summon her from the pendulum zone, and then you can special summon one monster from your deck that you can put a spell counter on, as long as it has at least 1,000 or more attack, and then you put a spell counter on both of them. So if she's got 3 spell counters, you just remove 3, summon it, summon something from your deck. Usually you'll either be summoning like Endymion, the Mighty Master of Magic, or you'll summon like something like Mythical Beast Jackal King, put a counter on both, so you've got a solid negate on the field. And it's pretty good that she can drop them from the deck, because, like I said, you remove 3 to do so, and then you summon it and something from the deck, and you put a spell counter on both. So essentially you're only losing 1 spell counter, which isn't so bad. And as a monster, she's got a summon restriction that you can only special summon her once per turn. And if she's got a spell counter on her, she can attack directly. And then probably the best effect that she's got is once per opponent's turn, as a quick effect, you can discard a card, place spell counters on each card on your field that you can place a spell counter on. So A, that's really good because it generates tons of spell counters on your field, and B, really good way to get rid of any bricks in your hand. Not that you get too many bricks, not that you would get too many bricks with this deck, but just a nice option. And her final effect, which is pretty useful, is if she's destroyed in the monster zone, you can put her in your pendulum zone, and she also gets to keep. And then you place spell counters on her equal to the number that she had when she was a monster, so you don't lose any of those spell counters. Furthermore, if you've got the Magical Citadel field spell on the field, you actually increase your spell counters because she transfers to the pendulum zone, keeps the ones that she has, and the effect of Citadel transfers the counters that your destroyed monster had over to it. So really good like that as well. Yeah. So yeah, she is always the one that you want to go into starting off. And also your primary main low scale. Next one we're playing is triple copy of Magister of Endymion. So Magister is the main scale 8 that you'll want to be using when you're not using Mighty Master. So Magister's pendulum effect is same as Servant, gains a spell counter every time a spell card resolves, and Magister removes 3 spell counters to special summon himself and 1 monster from your extra deck that you can put a spell counter on, and puts a spell counter on both. So Magister acts a bit more as your extender after you're setting up. And then as a monster, like Servant, he's got a summon restriction of once per turn. And Magister, as a quick effect Magister, when he declares an attack, you get to put a spell counter on it. And as a quick effect, in your opponent's turn, you can remove 3 spell counters from your field and special summon 1 monster from your deck that you can put a spell counter on. And then also, like Servant, if he dies in the monster zone, you can put him in the pendulum zone. So Magister's a good way to help generate additional negates by being able to summon out Jackal King straight from the deck, or also like summoning Mighty Master to, if you're feeling you're in a situation that you want to have another spell negate. So Magister's definitely really useful as well. So again, another card that you'd want to max out at 3 of. Next card in the deck, I'm playing 2 copies of Reflection of Endymion. So, like the others, as a pendulum, like the others, she gains a spell card every time something resolves. And by removing 3, if you guys haven't guessed it already, so Servant does from deck, Magister does from extra deck, Reflection, she summons one from the hand. She summons one from the hand, so that's pretty useful. And like the others, again, as a monster, she's got a summon restriction of once per turn. And her effect is when she's special summoned, you can target a card your opponent controls and something you control with a spell counter on it, except for herself, and return both cards to the hand. So really nice little built-in Magispector Unicorn Kieran effect. And also the return card that you get to move the spell counters over to her, which is pretty useful. And her secondary effect is, if she's destroyed in battle with a spell counter on her, you get to add any Endymion card from your deck to your hand. This one normally might not come up too frequently because generally you'd want to put her in defense mode because she's a solid 2700 defense, which is nothing to complain about. But if you really want that surge, naturally you can put her in attack mode, crash her, and then get a surge. Because she's only got an 1850 attack stat, which is kind of average. But yeah, I'm only playing two. I only play two reflection because unlike the others, she's not really as good. She's not really as good. She's better for like going second. So pretty, but still useful, and she's a solid card. Okay, so that's it for the Endymions that you play. Next, because you're a spell counter based deck, putting in got a Mythical Beast engine. So your Mythical Beast engine playing 3 Master Cerberus as your set. He's naturally your setup and also a beta. So his pendulum effect rotates for any of your Mythical Beasts, and as provided you've got nothing in your other scales. So probably if you're setting up, you usually want to do your Mythical Beasts first, then go into your Endymions. Sometimes they can conflict with each other, but or possibly Cerberus is really good if you're using it as the 3rd spell counter on one of your monsters. Because if say they've got 2, you just go activate Cerberus, get a spell counter, do their effect, special summon from the zone, and then one from wherever they go. And then you've now got your scale open, so you can now do Master Cerberus with no worries. And then naturally, of course, Master Cerberus' monster effect gains 2 spell counters every time a spell resolves, so another way to generate spell counters very quickly. And Cerberus can't be destroyed by card effects when there's 4 more spell counters on your field, which is pretty easy to do in this deck. And then, also once per turn, in your turn, you can remove 4 spell counters from your field, target a monster your opponent controls, banish it face up, and gain its attack until the end of an opponent's next turn. So, good way to get yourself a really big beater on the field. Next, 3 Jackal King. So Jackal King's pendulum effect naturally destroy himself to special summon a Mythical Beast from the extra deck. So a good way to bring back that Cerberus if you need that beta. Sadly it can't summon itself, but that's kind of to be expected. Jackal King also gains 2 spell counters every time a spell card resolves as a monster, and by removing 2 spell counters from your field, you can negate a monster effect and destroy it, and that's once per card. So if you've got multiple of them, you can do it multiple times in a turn. I feel this Endymion deck is kind of what Mythical Beasts needed to reach their full potential, because guys, as most of you would know, Jackal King has the ability to stop monsters, but Mythical Beasts have never had a way to stop spells. Now we've got Mighty Master, they've got that now, so working together, they're essentially a really good, very solid deck. And then the last Mythical Beast I'm playing are my one-offs, which are 1 Mythical Beast Jackal and 1 Mythical Beast Garuda. So Jackal, I only play him as a one-off because frankly, if you're using the Endymions, you'll tend to keep your scale, so you might not be using Jackal for a scale effect. Which Jackal as a scale just lets you put a spell counter on something and destroy himself. But the main reason you want to use him is a monster, main use primarily for that normal summon. So summon Jackal, remove 3 spell counters from your field, tribute it, and then special summon a Mythical Beast from your deck. Usually you're probably going into Jackal King if you're setting up, so you've got that negate. Or if you're trying to push for damage, probably the Master Cerberus so that you'd banish something. And then Garuda, as a pendulum, acts as a bit of back row sniping. But one of the main reasons you use it is for its monster effect, which is if the main effect being when your opponent normal special summons a monster or monsters, you can remove 3 spell counters from your field, special summon Garuda, and then return those monsters back to your opponent's hand. And like most other cards, he gains 1 spell counter every time a spell resolves as a monster, which is really useful in combo with the sorceress with Endymion the Mighty Master. So you'd use Endymion's effect targeting your Garuda, bounce the Garuda to negate what your opponent's doing, and then Garuda's back in your hand so that you can do it again. Which is pretty good. Love it. And that's it for the pendulums that I'm main decking. And then the last of my monster lineup, this one's more personal. This one's kind of more personal choice based off the format. I'm decided to play 3 Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit in my main deck, just as a way to stop lots of decks from as a way to stop a lot of decks going off, particularly since so many decks are dropping Yugioh. So basically, what I can do with that Ogre is the moment they summon Yugioh with 4, they goes Yugioh effect to draw 4. Ghost Ogre, just kill it. Sure, they can have the draw, but they don't get the monster, which is fine with me. And also, Ghost Ogre is really useful in the mirror match because, as I said, because all the Endymion cards remove their spell counters as cost as pendulums, if they get Ghost Ogre, naturally they just resolve without their effects. So this is just a really good way to try and stop the Mighty Master in the mirror match before he can do his other thing. Also, lots of good situations that's Ghost Ogre's useful for. And also the third reason I'm playing her, the last reason I'm playing her is because of my extra deck, which I'll get into in a moment, because of her level. My only issue with main decking the Ghost Ogre is that naturally if I see multiple of it, it's not great, but hey, that's kind of what most of the game is like. If you see multiple of something, it's not great, particularly if it's a once per turn thing. So I might change that, but for the moment I'll see how the format goes. Okay guys, so that's it for the monsters I'm playing. Going into the spells, starting with probably the main one. Playing 3 copies of Magical Citadel of Endymion. So this is your way to just generate all your spell counters, get to spell counter every time a spell resolves. And also if a card with spell counters is destroyed, you get to move them over to your Citadel. And once per turn, if a card would activate its effect by removing spell counters from your field, you can remove the same number from Endymion instead. That's really useful when you're setting up with Servant or extending with Magister. Really great way to set those up. And naturally, it's got its own effect that if it would be destroyed, you could just remove a spell counter from it instead. It also makes, like, some people I've seen are playing this at 2 because they tend to use it just as their bounce target for for Mighty Master, which is a valid idea, but I still feel 3 is absolutely fine. And if I feel I don't need the third one, usually that just makes for an easy side deck option. Next, to go with the Citadel, 2 terraforming, just as a way to quickly get to it. Guys, I apologize about the odd rarities. I'm still waiting for my second ultimate red terraforming to show up, because when I was building this deck, I felt I really like this deck. I'm going to commit to it. I want to max rarity this deck, so yeah. But I didn't actually want to do this profile until the deck was max rarity, but I felt I couldn't wait. I had to just showcase it. So well, yeah. Terraforming, just a way to quickly search your Endymion. Citadel. I need to stop calling these cards Endymion and start calling them by the other parts of their names. It was easy when Endymion was just a card on its own. Next, playing your main Searcher of the deck. 3 copies of Spell Power Mastery. So this card lets you add an Endymion card from your deck to your hand, so it searches your big monster lineup. It can also search your field spell. And then after it searches, you can put spell counters on your field up to the number of Spell Power Mastery and Spell Power Grasp that you have in your control or in your graveyard. So when you activate it, you can give one card an additional spell counter throughout the game, and then over the course of the game, you can add more, which is really good. And it's a normal spell, so it's something that's searchable with Mighty Master if he gets destroyed in battle, which is pretty useful. Basically, and also this plus Servant, that's basically an instant Servant straight away. You just need like one additional spell, which isn't difficult in this deck. But yeah, if you're playing Endymion pure or with other engines, you should definitely always want to max out on the Spell Power Mastery. Next, this one. This one I've seen isn't really being played in other builds, but I like it in mine. I'm playing 3 copies of Endymion's Lab. I just like it because it's another quick because it's like Citadel, because its name becomes Citadel while it's in the spell and trap zone, which isn't really too big of a deal unless you're playing the original Endymion, Master of Magic. But I just like it for its main effect that it's like Citadel. It gains a spell counter every time something resolves, so it's just a very nice, very quick way to generate spell counters quickly. And its secondary effect can be quite useful every now and then. Its secondary effect, for those who don't know, its secondary effect is if your spellcaster is destroyed by battle, you can remove 6 spell counters from your field to special summon a level 7 or higher spellcaster from your hand or deck. So one thing you could do with that is just drop the Mighty Master, but since it won't have its spell counter, that makes it quite vulnerable. But one of the things you might choose to do with it is summon the Reflection, because Reflection's effect on summon is just you get to bounce a card with spell counters and a card your opponent controls. So a good way to just interact a good way to disrupt in your opponent's turn. So yeah, I've been testing it through. I quite like it for the moment, but as the format progresses, I might cut it or whatever. We'll just see. Next spell I'm playing is 3 Mythical Institution. I decided to go with this card instead of Magical Abductor. I decided to go with this instead of Magical Abductor just because I feel it's a lot easier. And also it's another card I can very easily bounce with Sorcerer Supreme. And if I do bounce it with... Oh, sorry. Mighty Master. Guys, I'm just so used to the OCG name. And frankly, Endymion, the founding Sorcerer Supreme, was such a better name. Why did they change it? Why? So anyway, Institution, it's just a way to search any monster from your deck that can hold spell counters, which is essentially the entire deck. I mean, pretty much. And Institution lets you use spell counters from anywhere on your field, which is why I kind of chose it over Magical Abductor, because Magical Abductor has to use the spell counters from itself, or naturally Magical Citadel. And Institution's also a great way to generate spell counters if you're setting up and you open a decent Mythical Beast engine, because basically that and Cerberus is pretty much a lot of quick spell counters, because just Cerberus, destroy itself and search like Jackal King, gets 2 spell counters, activate the Jackal King, destroy special summon Cerberus, gains another 2 spell. That's 4 spell counters very quickly. And like Citadel, it can save itself by removing a spell counter from itself. And again, it's a continuous spell, so another good card that you can easily bounce if you don't feel like bouncing one of your Endymion skills. And then the last 4 cards in my deck, they're my draw cards. So for my draw cards, I've gone with a one upstart Goblin, because it's just a very quick, very easy spell counter. And last one, my draw card of choice is Pot of Extravagance. I've been doing lots of testing with this, and I really like Pot of Extravagance as it, because I've done lots of testing. I know some of you might be thinking, Webbers, why would you play Pot of Extravagance? Because if you banish the Electromite, you lose. That's good. That's funny. I like that. Guys, I've done lots of testing with this deck. You do not need Electromite to function in this deck. Electromite's a good option is always nice if you go into it, but you do not need it to win. You really don't. And I also checked through Sam from Team Samurai X1's video. He chose to play Desires, which is a good option. Which naturally is a good option because easy +1, very easy. Never a bad time to activate it in this deck. Extravagance naturally has the downfall that if I'm going first and I open it, I'm not going to generate any spell counters at all, because you have to activate it at the start of your main phase 1. But that's not so bad. It's not so bad. But from what I saw from Sam from Samurai X1 is, when he did his regional and he came 9th place with this deck, with his version of the deck, he said he only made 3 different extra deck monsters, which was the Electromite, which he said he summoned every time, Breaker, which he made a couple of times, and then the Borrowload, which I think he said he summoned once. And that's something I've noticed in testing through the deck. even when I was playing Desire, when I tested through playing a Desire's variant, I noticed I really didn't use my extra deck very frequently. Like, recently I've been testing. Sometimes I will make the Electromite, but that's usually if I have absolutely no other choice, and assuming it's still in my extra deck. But yeah, I'm generally liking Pot of Extravagance. But guys, if you don't want to play the Extravagance build, Desires works absolutely fine as well. And if any of you are wondering about the new Pendulum Halt that's coming out in Dark Neostorm as a draw possibility for this card, I've tested it. It can work, but it's not really very consistent in the pure variant because you don't really get many different named pendulums into your extra deck. But if you're playing like in combination with the Magician variant or with lots of Electromite Turbo cards, then yeah, Pendulum Halt's really useful, and you can play that alongside the Desires as well. And the other advantage of Pendulum Halt is naturally it's a pendulum spell, so you can search it with the Lost Alliance. Okay, so that's it for the main deck. Going into the extra deck, because mine's an Extravagance build, I've actually altered my extra deck to be quite a bit more, to be more like a consistent variant. So, playing one Electromite, minimum explanation needed. Pendulum deck, don't need to explain that. Next, 3 of the new Daybreaker, the Shining Magical Warrior. So, Daybreaker requires 2 spellcaster monsters to be summoned, which is pretty easy because pretty much your entire deck is spellcasters, so very much is easy to make as Electromite. And when he's link summoned, he gets a spell counter, and he gains 3 spell counters for each spell counter on himself. And he has 2 different effects, both of which can be used once per turn, which is if a spellcaster is special summoned to a zone it points to, he gets a spell counter, and you can remove 2 spell counters from himself to target a card on the field and destroy it. So that's pretty nice and pretty easy floodgate removal. So pretty nice. Next one I'm playing, 2 Crowley the First Prophecia. I don't actually play any spellbooks in my, as you guys just saw, I don't actually play any spellbooks in my deck, which is kind of a shame, but I'm primarily using him for, one is his link arrows, because they're the same as Electromite, the same as Daybreaker. The secondary effect of and also the secondary effect that once per turn you can summon a high-level spellcaster without attributing, so good way to just drop a Jackal King or a Cerberus if you have absolutely no other options. But I don't really use this I don't use it too frequently, or really at all, because as I explained, guys, I'm playing Pot of Extravagance, but I feel it's a nice option. Next, playing 2 Nightmare Unicorn just as spot removal that some of my other cards, if I desperately need to, like if one of my other cards are stuck, or say like I'm under like a D barrier and my monsters have their effects negated, so Unicorn's there to help get me out of it. And again, playing it 2 because Extravagance variant. Next, double Borrowload, kind of extra deck boss to deal with problematic situations. Yeah. I decided to go with the alternate artwork because I quite like it, and I didn't really feel like playing one. And I could go 1 Borrowload, 1 Borrow Sword, but again, it's an Extravagance build, so I decided to just make it simpler. That's it for the links I'm playing, and then into the other stuff I'm playing. So, as I told you guys earlier, I was playing Ghost Ogre for a couple of reasons. One was for its main purpose. The second was for this extra deck monster, which is an absolute blowout if you're playing a mirror match. 3 copies of Tempest Magician. So Tempest Magician's effect is when she's synchro summoned, you get to put a spell counter on it, and once per turn you can discard any number of cards to place a spell counter on monster or monsters you control for every card you discarded. And the main reason you play her is the third effect, which is you can remove all spell counters on the field to inflict 500 damage to your opponent for each removed spell counter. So against your opponent, So if your opponent's set up a lot, you could just go drop Tempest Magician, effect, remove all spell counters, and blast you for damage. And if you haven't used her second effect, you can just go effect of Tempest, discard, put spell counters on everything that can. Put spell counters on everything on my field on the field that can. And then, interesting enough, guys, her final effect isn't once per turn. So if you go Tempest Magician's effect, remove spell counters, kill her, burn you for everything that's got one, and then use her second effect to discard one to put spell counter on everything you've got that can. You can then use her third effect again to burn your opponent again. So yeah, playing Temp. So yeah, that's one of the reasons I'm playing Ghost Ogre, to allow myself access to Synchro Summon into her, which can then essentially win you the mirror match. Also, it's another good option because of the time-based rules as a burn option going into time. And another option I like with the Ghost Ogre is that if I feel like it, I can also play Emergency Teleport as a way to get to summon her out, generate spell counters, and just make the Tempest Magician a bit more consistent. I just haven't figured out space for it yet. And then the last card I'm playing, just another negate option I can play. 2 copies of number 75 Bamboozling Gossip Shadow. Because Gossip Shadow just requires 2 plus level 3 monsters, which essentially your setup and extender are. And then Gossip Shadow just naturally can negate a monster effect and change it to both players draw a card. It's also a 2600 defense, and it's a spellcaster as well, which is pretty useful if you want to go into other plays. Okay, that's it for the extra deck. Going into my side deck for what I've chosen for it. Again, a very basic side deck. So starting it off, side deck 3 Denko. 3 Denko, really good against the Sky Striker matchup, against a couple of back row specific decks like, I don't know, Guru Control, if you guys have been dealing with that. If you guys haven't had to deal with Guru Control, it's not fun. I don't like it at all. Yeah, Denko's always been like a very strong side card, so going with that. Next, I'm playing 3 Phantasme, because Strikers, Salamangreat. Usually this deck can very much like going second, so this is a really nice going second option. Just good way to like cycle through your hand. Good way to take out some of those multiples that you might have in your hand. And just generically, he's really good. Generically, he's really good, so I'm really liking him. I actually thought about main decking this instead of the Ghost Ogre, which does work, but frankly, I feel he's better inside. So, yeah, going with him. And then last monster in my side deck, 3 sphere mode for decks that like to overextend. Also very useful, and also naturally very useful in the mirror match, because this deck would, as a pendulum deck, this deck likes to overextend on its board. Yeah. So yeah, that. I am thinking about playing the new Gnome material when it comes out in Dark Neostorm. I just need to figure out which card in my side deck I want to take out, unless I choose to main deck it, in which I'll probably take out the Ghost Ogre, and then subsequently I would just probably take out the Tempest Magician. But again, I'll just see as the format progresses. Next in my side deck, my back row removal, I've decided to go with 3 Cosmic Cyclone. Yeah. Yes, I know this card's not great for going into time, because you have to pay 1,000 to activate it, but this card I'm liking particularly for the mirror match, as opposed to destroying it, because if they try and destroy the scales, and they've got spell counters on it with the Citadel, I mean, the spell counters just get transferred over there. I mean, if you've got your Citadel active, you get to do the same thing, but Cosmic Cyclone, I feel, is just a bit better, just to remove it without destroying it, and useful against other kinds of decks as well. And then last card of my side deck to deal with traps that come up. 3 red reboots. Simple. No minimum explanation needed. It's just the best option to counter traps. Okay guys, so that's the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed it. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think. And again guys, my variant was based on the pure variant, so I hope that gives you like an insight to how the deck can work playing pure. But naturally, I've seen there's lots of different ways that you can play with this deck. I've seen people that are using pendulum magicians with it, Zephyras, Sam from Team Saber X one played Amorphages with it, which seems to work quite interestingly. It's a legit shout. Again, loads of different things you can do with the deck. Let me know. I'd also like to know in the comments what you guys are thinking about playing in your variants of the deck. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, and actually like the video as always, subscribe to the channel. And if you really enjoy my content and want to see more, hit that notification bell to never miss an upload. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.